what you said before about it's okay that you love, your son more than other people's sons. I wonder sometimes phrases like that. There's part of me that hears it and is like, yeah, of course. There's another part of me that hears that and is like, is that true though? Like, if we're being totally honest, is that more something we say to ourselves to feel comfortable? Because it seems too radical to think I should not love my son more than I love my neighbor's son or somebody across the world's son. Because is the truth, if we're being totally honest, like, no, like, very much in what you're saying, we should all try and get to that highest level where we feel the same about every human being. So let me ask maybe two questions. One, is that actually what we should strive for? And two, if it is, how accountable should we hold people to that, to where we should tell them, like, no, that's actually how you should feel? It sounds radical in some ways, but in some ways it doesn't, given what you're saying,
Yeah, so no, I like the rephrasing this, and something I've been careful noticing in my own mind and in terms of language is when I say the word should. Should is saying that things should be different than they are, instead of really embracing what is happening, which is kind of a deep kind of acceptance and acknowledgement of just the reality at any given situation. And so even though I feel it's nice to want to move towards this larger stance of seeing our oneness and caring everybody deeply, there are degrees of love, and so I don't think we're supposed to abandon our personal experience and care about everybody radically the same. If I've spent 20 years with a lover, of course I care about them more than somebody I've never met, of course. And I think that's accurate. I've formed attachment bonds with them. Something that's special about us as mammals, and we form deep attachment relationships. Oxytocin happens, we get really bonded, they mean a lot to us. And so I think it's right. So it's like there's the field of expansion of awareness, love keeps expanding, but you still have like your core little groups, your family members that you want to have healthy, awesome relationships with and cultivate and care. We don't have the energy to cultivate deep relationships with everybody on the planet.
Well, here's the question to that though, right? Like, are we as humans capable at scale, right, to distinguish that, right? To be able to say, I love, right where I was with my wife, I love my son, I love my mother, I love my friend, my neighbor, whatever, maybe deeper than I do other people. Are we capable as humans to be able to distinguish that and say, but I still do love everybody else, and not allow the tribalism, the racism, that like, protect me against you, right? Scarcity of resources. Like, in theory, it makes sense what you're saying, but are we actually capable of doing that in real life? Or once we allow it in for the idea that I can love somebody deeper than somebody else, that starts a path which is inevitably towards tribalism, racism, etc.
Yeah. So can we? I feel it's my truth. I feel I love everybody and I love some people more. And I think that's kind of true for you, just given you're saying like you have care and love for a lot of humanity, and there's people that you have a preference to be around that you care more about. Yeah. So I do think it's completely possible. And I don't think everybody's completely there. And some of the things is just having the opportunities. So just even looking at what's happening within the US, they've found correlations between people that are in more isolated communities, like the Midwest, are a little bit more tribal. But then people that live in larger cities, because there's so much diversity, they've seen so much humanity, that kind of tribalness seems to kind of dissolve a little bit. They kind of expand their view. And part of it's just they're more around other ideas and perspectives, and that kind of helps them grow and change. Aside for some people, they've been in the same kind of intellectual bubble for generations, like in a little religious kind of bubble. So I think we all have the opportunity, if we're put in the right kind of context and container, and given safety, love, the ability to learn, like we tend to expand. But if we're missing some of those nutrients, like even in the terms of just ideas entering our system, then there's less opportunity to integrate a lot of those ideas that help us kind of grow.
It makes me think of the word, you said it before, humility. That comes up often for me. And I think there is a level of humility which is required to allow us to reach that point that you're saying, right? Because even if it's that I live in an isolated community or some sort of a bubble, there's a humility to even be aware of that and acknowledge like, oh, maybe there's some shadow side that comes with this lifestyle that is all I've ever known. And humility becomes so important. And I wonder, tying it back to the psychedelics, like, you could do it arguably without psychedelics, right? But it's hard, it's painful. And to get that level of humility to question yourself, acknowledge the flaws, I've done a lot of it myself, not nearly as much as I should, but it's painful. Is that where you see the psychedelics come in? It allows you to get to that level of humility without going through as much suffering. Is that a fair way to say it?
Totally. Yeah. You can still suffer quite a bit on them, but it kind of really streamlines and accelerates the process. I've seen many people work with, they get more out of 6 hours than 20 years of therapy, right? It's really kind of multifaceted. Like it works as like this deconditioning agent. We're born in this environment where we fed all these ideas about who we are in the world. And some of it's kind of sometimes toxic. Like people, when they come in for depression, they come in with a really poor image and bad idea of who they are themselves. They think they're not enough, they're broken, they're bad. And so it's this constant pain, or they think the world's inherently bad because they've been betrayed by somebody, or a lot of government and religious ideas. And there's like almost a reset button that can happen with psychedelics where the whole thing's wiped clean for a bit and you're able to see everything from this kind of new, kind of more pristine perspective, and it gives them a new point of reference. They also, one of the main characteristics of psychedelics is kind of boundary dissolving. So we see even when the brain, we have what's called the default mode network, which is known by neuroscientists as the ego part of the self. That network dissolves, which creates this hyper-connected brain state. So all these other parts of us that are normally repressed begin to talk to each other. And in terms of the boundary dissolution, people tend to feel one with the environment, one with other. So now they have the personal experience. It's no longer idea of this oneness, and people begin to see their own limitations and patterns that they were normally unconscious to.
So let's hit this part of it too, because even as we're talking about this, and I've studied some of this, I'm somewhat familiar with it, those benefits seem so amazing, simply put, right? But I know there's possibly people listening to this, people I know, family members maybe even, who are listening that are worried, like, oh shit, you're talking to somebody about psychedelics, like what's gone wrong, like I need to be worried now. Where do you think that comes from? Like, and maybe it's a bigger conspiracy theory type thing, which it very well might be. Like, I'm not blind to that, but like, how do you think it got to this point today where it's even a topic? Like, if it has that much benefits, I know there's risk in everything, but like, why isn't it that it's more widely used? Why are people so skeptical of it? Why isn't it being embraced to make the world a better place like it should be?